Hey folks, my name is Dave Kidd. I'm a psychotherapist, and this is my podcast, where every episode we explore images or metaphors that I use in my counseling practice every day, and I share them with you in hopes that you might find them useful as well. For the two regulars that keep looking for our podcast episodes, you'll notice we haven't posted any episodes for about a month and a half. My apologies. We kind of got caught up in the holidays, and then we're having crazy weather here in Ontario, and so there's been a whole bunch of reasons, but we're back and ready to roll. My sidekick Lily is here, of course. Lily, could you make an animal sound that comes from an animal born between July and February of 1933? Whoa, what was that?
A cat.
Oh, yeah, there's probably a cat born during that period. Probably. Yeah, but that was a cat. Is that what that was?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I thought it was a snake.
No.
I didn't?
No.
Pretty sure I thought it was a snake. No. Okay, well, anyway, it's good to have you aboard. We love Lily, don't we? Mm-hmm. So, as I mentioned previously, as our episodes increase, we're going to end up talking about similar topics over and over again. So now we're going to go to the second episode on anxiety. The first one, you remember, was about the cliff and
the Grand Canyon.
The Grand Canyon, yep. So the whole point of the first episode on anxiety was to lay out how anxiety is a future-based phenomenon. So the future is anxiety's food. And we talked about how you need to starve your anxiety so that it doesn't increase and make a hell of a mess.
True that.
Yeah, because it'll make one hell of a mess. So this follow-up episode is about another aspect of anxiety called unjustified fear. That's core to the definition of anxiety, unjustified fear. So I want you to picture anxiety as an imaginary bear chasing. Let's explore. As always, we've got a picture that explains this concept. We've got little old me, scared. As you can see, I'm running away from this imaginary bear. Lily drew this wonderful picture, as she always does. I think she's knocked this one out of the park, as she also usually does.
Usually.
Thanks, Lo.
No problem.
Okay. So, anxiety is believing there's a bear chasing you when there's no bear chasing you. This is the idea for today. Anxiety ultimately is based on a lie, an illusion. So when we talk about treating anxiety in therapy, it all comes down to exposing this lie, convincing you of the illusion. You're being afraid of something that you don't need to be afraid of. Now, there's lots of different ways of approaching this. There's lots of different schools of counseling, each with their own idea of how to get to that goal. So I'm going to show you how I've patched together what I believe are the best approaches of dealing with anxiety. And I've combined them to create my ideal version that will ultimately help you see through this illusion so that you're no longer afraid of things you don't have to be afraid of. The first thing we're going to talk about is cognitive behavior therapy. and the pieces that I draw from cognitive behavior therapy. Then we're going to turn to acceptance commitment therapy, ACT, and I'm going to show you what we can bring from ACT. There's also behavior therapy, which deals with the technique of exposure, and we'll see how that can be a part of our treatment as well. And at the end, we'll show how it all gets thrown in together to make something beautiful. Believing that there's a bear chasing you when there's no bear chasing you. Let's start with the well-known neuropsychologist Joseph Ledoux. So Joseph Ledoux wrote Anxious, and what he identified is that humans have a unique advantage and disadvantage compared to non-sentient animals. So our dog Charlie is afraid when he's in the presence of a bear because he sees the bear as a threat. But when the bear leaves, Charlie's fear leaves as well. Because humans are self-conscious and they're not constrained to the present, they're able to think backwards and forwards and around 360. And there's amazing things that come with that. We can remember and we can learn from our memories. We can look into the future and anticipate and avoid problems that way. But there's a downside too, because when we're in the presence of the bear, we feel scared, just like our dog Charlie. But when the bear leaves, our fear comes with us. So dogs leave their fear where they found it, and humans can take the fear with us. That becomes anxiety. Another way of looking at it is dogs can only be chased by a bear, where humans can be chased by the thoughts of a bear. And that's where we get into trouble. My job as a psychotherapist is to convince you that there's no bear chasing you. So here's how I go about doing it. I told you we'd start with cognitive behavior therapy. What cognitive behavior therapy is about is looking at your problem thinking. It believes that if it can rehabilitate your thinking, it can rehabilitate you. All problems originate from problem thinking. And the problem thinking, they call cognitive distortions. If your thinking is a distorted version of reality, you're going to run into problems. And cognitive behavior therapy tries to undistort that thinking to make it represent reality better. So one core feature of cognitive behavior therapy comes from this famous book, Mind Over Mood, famous in therapy circles anyway. Dennis Greenberger and Christine Pedesky wrote this a long time ago. And there's a component of it that I've used in the past, and it really illustrates accurately what's behind the overall approach of cognitive behavior therapy. The component I'm talking about, the thought record. So the thought record gets clients to fill out this chart, and it talks about the situation where anxiety occurs, the mood and the intensity of the mood that the client was feeling in the situation, the automatic thoughts, the thoughts that were creating those moods and emotions. You want to list those as well. And then you put the thought on trial. Evidence for that thought, evidence against that thought, and then you come up with a balanced thought that's meant to better reflect reality and destroy those cognitive distortions. Then you can rate your mood again, just to see if the intensity of the emotion has been reduced as you've worked through the rational analysis. So that's cognitive behavior therapy. If we look at the fear of a bear chasing you, how are we going to deal with that regarding cognitive behavior therapy? The cognitive behavior therapists are going to ask, what's the evidence that there's a bear chasing you? You list that evidence out. What's the evidence against the bear chasing you? And you list that out. And when you get to the balanced thought, so let's actually do that. So we'll just do a really simple version. So evidence that there's a bear chasing you. So yesterday, you were on a nature hike, walking through the woods. You drove a couple hours out of town. We were walking through the woods, and you thought you heard a bear. And so you took off like crazy. So today, you're just walking, you're taking a stroll through a park in the middle of town. But there's something in you that remembers the bear chasing you, and you worry that there might be a bear chasing you. And so you start running just in case, just in case. So CBT would be asking, what's the evidence for the thought that there's a bear chasing you? Well, maybe you might say, yesterday there was a bear chasing me. That wasn't very long ago. So maybe there's going to be a bear chasing me today as well. I was in nature yesterday and the bear's chasing me. This park is kind of nature, and so maybe there's a bear chasing me today as well. Evidence for running away from the bear being a good idea would be, why don't I do this just in case? It's better to be safe than sorry, right? So that would be evidence for a bear chasing you. Evidence against a bear chasing you would be, this is a city park. There's never been a bear in the city park ever. And before, you were out in nature. Also, was there even a bear behind you, or did you just think there was when you were doing your nature walk in the middle of the wilderness? Maybe there wasn't even a bear there. You heard some scuffling around in the bush, but it might not even been a bear. Then you take the evidence for and the evidence against that thought, and you come up with a balanced thought that's supposed to better reflect reality. How convincing would the evidence be for the fact that there's a bear chasing you in the city park?
How convincing is it?
Yeah.
Not convincing.
Yeah. And so
That's what a balanced thought means?
a balanced thought is taking all evidence into account. And sometimes it's completely ludicrous what your thought is. And so you can, and so the balanced thought is, this is never happening and it's not a thing. Other times it's, well, there might be a tiny chance, but you shouldn't worry about it too much. So ultimately, the balanced thought reflects reality. Sometimes there's a little bit of risk in reality. Sometimes there's no risk. Sometimes there's a lot of risk. And your balanced thought's going to tell you that. Right? So in this instance, your balanced thought is probably going to say, there is not zero chance that there can be a bear here chasing you, but it's going to be so small that you shouldn't worry about it. That would be your balanced thought, right? So there is a problem with this. Lil, if you are dealing with anxiety, you got this anxiety villain, right? The problem villain in your life movie. Let's call it the anxiety villain this time. Its job is to ruin things for you, because that's what villains do. If it hears this balanced thought, there's just a minuscule chance of a bear chasing you, so you shouldn't worry about it. What's your anxiety villain going to focus on?
That 1% chance.
Exactly, that minuscule chance. So the risk isn't zero, and so the anxiety villain is going to find that little sliver, that thin edge of the wedge, and pry that fear open.
Freak out.
And it's going to make you freak what?
Freak out.
Yeah. It's going to make you freak out.
Exactly.
Right. So that's a problem with cognitive behavior therapy. When you try to argue yourself out of these issues, oftentimes you can't argue yourself down to zero risk. And then there's the chance that the anxiety villain is going to use that little risk against you. So what are we going to do about this? Well, let's keep going. Acceptance commitment therapy is another popular approach in counseling, and it offers an element that can help with this. Its approach basically is, if you can make your thoughts not matter, then you don't have to worry about a thought record. You don't have to judge your thoughts. You just have to make your thoughts not matter, and then they're not going to affect you. Which I think makes a lot of sense. And I've definitely incorporated this in therapy to help working with anxious clients. If you're worried that there's a bear chasing you when you're going for a walk in a city park, acceptance commitment therapy would give you techniques to separate you from your thoughts. I think I mentioned this in an earlier episode. They have this concept called defusion, where they defuse you from your thoughts. They show that there's distance between thinking and reality. Just because you think something doesn't make it happen. So how they would approach the bear situation is they would get you to use the techniques they've taught you to make your thoughts not matter. Just quickly, as an example, one might be using an image to show how thoughts are separate from you. So I've heard them discuss an image of thoughts like produce in a grocery store. So you go into the grocery store, you get to choose what thoughts you pick up. And if you don't want a thought, you don't have to pick it up. You don't have to engage with it. So you're in charge. If you don't pick the thought up, then it doesn't affect you. Another image is imagining the thought like a tug-of-war rope. The only way that you can lose to that anxious thought is if you pick up the rope. If you don't pick up the rope, that thought can't win you over and affect you. So using those images helps to make your thoughts not matter. So that's really helpful. Another approach that's useful when it comes to anxiety treatment is behavior therapy. Now, there's a lot that goes into behavior therapy, but one aspect is called exposure. And what that is basically exposing you to the fear-inducing circumstance to show you that there's an illusion there, that it's a lie. So it uncovers the lie as it exposes you to the situation. Does that make sense, though?
Yes.
It does? Okay. So if you're worried that there's a bear chasing you, and so you're just running and running and running and not looking back, I don't want to stop running just in case there's a bear there, exposure therapy is a bit scary at the beginning, but ultimately there's a big payoff. What's the only way of exposing the lie that there's a bear chasing you? If the lie is there's a bear chasing you when there's no bear chasing you, what's the only way of calling out that lie and exposing it as a lie?
Turning around.
Yeah. How friggin' scary is that? Because if you're wrong, you're gonna get friggin' mauled by a friggin' bear. So the only way of exposing that lie is to turn around, ultimately. And then you risk getting mauled by a bear. And that's a big risk. And so most people don't turn around. It's better to be safe than sorry, right? It's better to be safe than sorry. So exposure therapy is convincing the client to stop and turn around. And as the client is exposed to the situation they're fearful of, and no bear mauls them, they begin to learn that they don't have to be afraid. That's exposure therapy. So you can see how that could be a valuable tool in the anti-anxiety toolbox. What I've done in my approach is I've brought all of these things together and I've added an extra element. So this type of therapy, I call it DAT, D-A-T, Dave's Amazing Therapy. You like that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So back to episode 2. We're always going to come back to episode 2. It's important to identify an untrustworthy source in your life and a trustworthy source in your life, because then you can become sensitive to thoughts that you shouldn't trust and thoughts that you should trust. So that makes it a step ahead of CBT, because you don't have to argue with your thoughts. You just have to identify whether or not your thoughts are coming from a trustworthy or untrustworthy source. If they're coming from a trustworthy source, there's no thought records or arguing needed. You just have to accept it. This is your trustworthy voice, right? If it's coming from the untrustworthy source, your villain in your life movie, you don't have to argue with it or engage with it because that's actually what your villain wants. Instead, you use the ACT approach, the acceptance commitment therapy approach, where you learn to make your thoughts not matter. So you see how all of that comes together? And ultimately, that's the approach that I use with my clients. That's it. What do you want, Lil?
That's perfect. Jeez.
Okay. So let's bring it back to this picture. One of the core elements of anxiety is an illusion, is an untruth. And because we're humans, we're prone to these untruths. Because we're not like dogs who leave fear where they found it, we can take the fear with us. And we can apply it in situations where it has no business being applied. So, I've talked a little bit about how I deal with exposing this illusion in therapy, how other approaches use it, and how ultimately my approach kind of pulls together elements of a number of different approaches to create an Uber approach that I've found over the last 25 years works best. So I really hope that these ideas help you as you're dealing with your anxiety. And we're going to add this particular episode to our anxiety gallery in the Internal Art Museum. Well, folks, we're absolutely finished today. There's nothing more left. The tank is empty and we're done. I want you to do a few things. If you could, it would make me very happy. So if you could click subscribe, that'd be super nice. If you could also click on the notification bell. Why do I have such trouble saying bell? If you could click on the notification bell, also appreciated. And why not give it a like as well? All of this helps us as we're trying to break that 4 subscriber barrier. For months, we've been stuck at 4 subscribers and we want to blow through that into the 4+ club.
Like 2.5.
What's that?
2.5.
2.5?
Yeah. That
What?
comes after 4.
Oh, I thought you meant 2.5.
I see that.
Right.
Or
6. Or up,
no.
waiting,
No.
happy.
No.
I love this
6
game.
or
6 or 7.
yeah. Got him.
Oh, yeah. I know that means something,
Yeah.
but I don't know what it is. All the young kids are like this. I have no idea what the hell they're talking about because I'm an old man. So yeah, if you could do all those things, that'd be wonderful. We're finished today and we're going to catch up with you in the next episode. As far as I'm concerned, take care, y'all. So my job as a psychotherapist, I'm a psychotherapist. Listen to me, I'm a psychotherapist. All right.